Hello and welcome to part 6 of the tutorial series How to make a sandbox visual novel in visual novel machinery. In this video we'll be customizing the InGame UI. This guide will focus on how to do specific things in visual novel machinery, not on how to write the perfect story for Sandbox. So let's get started. If we want to customize the UI, we obviously also need new assets because otherwise we can just leave the UI the way it is. So for this purpose, I recommend that we use assets from Kenny, the UI pack from Kenny. Kenny is a developer who is creating UI assets for free. And you can also donate to him if you want to keep up the great work that he's doing. And we are going to use that as a pack. It's called UI pack, and this is the one that we're using. I already downloaded it, and I have also already imported it so that we save some time. So for this tutorial video, I'll be using Visual Novel Machinery version 1.9.4. So now let's check out all the assets that we imported. So I've added a folder to the arts folder called UI. And in it we have all the folders that were provided from the zip file that we downloaded. So if we go in and check blue and default, we can see all of the icons, all of the assets are here. Something that's very important is that once you have imported the UI elements, make sure that you select all of them. And a way to do it is to click on the filter icon here, go to textures, and select texture 2D, or actually texture. And then you can select all of them, right click them, go to asset actions, bulk edit via property matrix. Now it's loading all 868 assets, and make sure that the compression is set to user interface 2D, and that the texture group is set to UI, and the MIP-gen settings are also set from texture group. It just makes sure that this ensures that we are not generating MIP maps, because if we are using, so MIP maps are basically images in different resolutions. So which is relevant for 3D characters, for example. So if they are in the distance, then we don't want to use the high resolution texture, because it doesn't make sense to use 4K textures when the character is so far away that you don't properly see them. So MIP maps are therefore used to use lower resolution textures when the character is further away to save on memory. But for UI, we do not need any MIP maps, because there is no further away or closeness for the UI elements. The only side effect that we would have if we use MIP maps is that the UI elements are blurry for a few seconds, and then they're in the right resolution that we need. Alright, then after we have imported the UI assets, let's also import the font, because we might need the font. Now, one thing that you can see is, because I have currently the filter active, I now see all art assets in the whole project, or at least all art assets in the content folder of the project. To disable this filter, just click here, and we are back to the normal view. Now, let's import the font. So let's create a folder called fonts, and in this one we will import the font. So now navigate again to the folder where you extracted all of the Kenny UI pack assets, go to font, and then let's import Kenny Future. It will ask us if we want to create a new font asset for the font face that we are importing. Let's say yes. And now we can click here on Kenny Future font, and we see that default is Kenny Future. There's also a second font that can be used, which is called Kenny Future Narrow. Let's import that one as well. But this time let's press no. Let's save this. Then go to Kenny Future font and add the second one to the default font family. Let's call this Narrow. And let's select Kenny execution error. So now we have the option of it being default. If we are using the default font, then it's displayed like this. And if you use the narrow font, then it's displayed like this. If you want to also confirm other characters in the font, you can always just add new characters in here and you will see them in the preview. Alright. Now we have all the assets imported that we need. So let's get to actual customization. So how do we do customization? One option is that we navigate actually to the plugins content folder, go to blueprints, UI, in-game menu, and here we have all the assets that we need and we could customize them here directly. This would then also, this would be the easiest solution, but it has a major side effect because if you modify it in the engine folder, in the plugins folder which is in the engine, then all of your future projects will have the same styling as your first project, which can be nice if you want to have multiple projects with the same UI. But also on the other hand, you will not be able to update Visual Novel Machinery because these files will update as well depending on what's in an update for Visual Novel Machinery. So for this reason, Visual Novel Machinery supports widget generators, which we can use to generate the layout of these widgets and then implement them the way we want. Let's navigate back to main menu. Let's go to our content folder, blueprints, UI, and let's now create a few folders. The first folder that we want is common. It will include all the UI elements that are common, so they're used both in-game and in the main menu. Then let's create a folder called in-game. And then let's create a folder called main menu. Alright. Now first things first, let's go into the in-game folder and create our first asset. So let's go to right-click Visual Novel Machinery, click Visual Novel Machinery in-game widget. And then here we are presented with different widgets that are available in the plugin. So we have the CG display widget, we have the character display widget, we have the choice button, we have the choice widget, we have the control button, the dialog box widget, the image choice button, the image choice widget, and the scene background display widget. So let's create some of the more simpler UI elements first. So let's say we want to have the display widget. So let's click on it. And now let's call it w underscore sandbox CG display widget. Now let's open it. Let's compile it. And as you can see, everything is there as we need. We have a CG image and we have a CG image for transition. Now, let's talk about animations. Visual Novel Machinery supports animations through the transition system. But as we have now generated this widget, the animations are not fully implemented. They are available, but they have no animation setting here. So what we can do is that we navigate to the plugins folder, to the CG widget that's included in the plugins folder, and we can copy over the animations from there so we do not have to do it again manually. This is something that will be implemented down the line, that the animations get generated as well. But at this moment, I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but it is on my to-do list, so we'll get it down the line. Now let's go to the CG display widget. Let's open the animation. Let's check the fade animation. Now as we can see, for the fade animation, we listen to the CG image and we change the color. So what we can do is we can right click the color, copy, then we go here, animations, fade, track, CG image, and we paste it. Then we go back to here and we go to the dissolve. And as you can see, we have two elements here. So now let's right click the CG image, render opacity, copy, drag, and paste. And again, the second one, copy, CG image for transition, drag, paste. And now let's do it for all the other animations. Now we have all the animations set up. Now the last thing that we have to check after we have generated the layout is to make sure that that the graph implementation is similar or different depending on if you actually want to have the same functionality as the UI in the plugin or if you prefer to have your own implementation. So let's quickly check the CG display widget. Then let's go to graph and we can see nothing is here, so we can just save and we have it done. Now let's move on to the next one. So we do the next one, which is character display widget. So let's call this w_sandbox character display widget. Let's compile and save. And same procedure as before. Let's implement all of the animations. We again navigate to the plugins folder in game, character display widget, and animations, and we copy over everything that we need. So copy the render opacity of the character canvas, which is the canvas panel over here. We track it, and we save. And for confirmation again, we can now play the fade animation, and we see it has faded in. Now, let's do this for all the other animations as well, same as before. And there we have it. Now, let's move on to the next one. The next one will be, let's see, the next one of the more simpler ones is scene background display widget, which is basically the same as the CG display widget. So let's do that one first. Scene background display widget. Let's open it, compile and save. Perfect. Now, same as before, let's do the animations. Alright, the animations are done. Let's move on to the next one. Actually, before we do that, let's quickly check the graph. The graph is alright. And also we didn't do it before for the character widget, so let's check the character display widget as well. If we need to copy some graph, unless you want a different implementation. And also the character display widget does not have anything on the blueprint side, so everything is implemented on the C++ side. So we do not have to worry about anything else. Now let's see which one will we do next. Well, there are not many options left. So let's first do the choice button. So let's open this one already for later. Now let's go back to our blueprints, UI, in-game. We right click, visual novel machinery, in-game widget, and we select the choice button. So w_choice. Well, actually, let's call it Sandbox choice button. The reason why I prefix it with Sandbox choice button is because otherwise they have the same name as in the plugins folder. So when we down the line have to select which widget should be spawned, we want to make sure that we can identify the correct widget. Otherwise, you always have to guess, and it's just gonna take more time. Alright, let's check the button. Now let's save, compile, and we do not have any animations here, so we do not have to copy that over either. Let's check if there's a graph. And as we can see in this one, we actually do have a graph. So let's copy over the graph. What we can do is we can just basically take this directly, go to the other one, and paste it. Because they are exactly the same widget with exactly the same names, we can now click compile. And now we have, and so everything that's already in the layout is fine, but everything that's not in the layout, we have to actually establish. So the correct way is that we right click on it, best hover over the red area, right click, create variable, press background texture, Then let's do the same for the press color. Then the same for the idle background color. And then the idle color, hovered color, compile and save. The final things that we can do is we can now compare those settings to our Sandbox choice button to make sure they're the same for now. Also, let's reorganize it so that we first have all the textures and then all the colors. So the way to do this is that we reorganize them in the graph here. So first we have idle, then hovered, then pressed. Then idled color, pressed color, hovered. And now if we check again here, they are arranged the same way. Let's go back to the choice button and let's add our default settings for now. So right click. As you can see, we can press shift right mouse button to copy and shift left mouse button to paste. So shift right mouse button, shift left mouse button, shift right, shift left, shift right, shift left, shift right, shift left, shift right, shift left, shift right, and shift left. And now we have this exact same setup as with the other button. So now let's press compile and save here. And let's close this. Now that we have the choice button, the next thing to do is obviously that we make the choice widget, which consists of multiple Sandbox choice buttons. And here we have the first widget that has a dependency on another widget. And as I mentioned before, with the naming, we can now see why. Now, if we would have named both of them the same way, we would have no idea which one of the two is the correct one. But as we prefix the one with Sandbox, we know this is our button. So we press select, and then let's call this wChoice widget. Actually, let's call it Sandbox choice widget because of the naming. And as you can see, it has now generated the UI in the exact same way as it is in the plugin. So we have all of the buttons here and we have the choice arrow. One thing to note is that these buttons are only dummy buttons. They are there to show you how everything looks like. Now, as you can see, once again, we have animations. So same way as like before. So same way like before, we are going to copy over all of the animations from the plugins folder. So we go to UI, in-game, choice widget, and click the fade animation and copy over everything again. So back to choice widget, fade animation, drag, canvas panel, and render opacity. All right, then let's save this. And let's check quickly if the graphs are the same or if you have to copy something over. Alright, here we have some important stuff. What we do here is we clear the choice buttons list on construct. The reason why we do that is so that we don't have the dummy buttons there if we don't need them. Then compile and save. And then also one thing that's for styling purposes is that when a choice button is added, we can go ahead and style the button a little bit. So actually we can just copy the whole thing. And compile and save. Awesome. Now that we have finished this, what we can do is now actually do a little bit of customization now, because we have now established all of them, but we have not used any of Kenny's assets yet. So let's go ahead and use them. So let's go back to our in-game and the Sandbox choice button. And let's customize it. So let's change the background. To do that, we can just go here and select a different texture for the idle background texture. To make it easier, let's go to the content browser and let's select the choice button. I would say if green is already open here, then let's immediately go ahead and take green. So let's take button rectangle flat for the idle. the gloss for the hovered, and the depth flat for the pressed. And the color, let's reset it to complete white so it's not being colored in. So let's press compile and save. Now as you can see, the default is not changed because that's happening in here. So let's also quickly change the default background. So the default background was button rectangle flat. Let's move it into here. Press compile and save. And then, as the final last step, let's customize the text. As you can see, the text is a rich text block, which means it's using a styling asset. This styling asset, if we navigate to it, is located in the Visual Novel Machinery plugin folder data. But we don't want to use that one, we want to use our own one. So let's go to the data folder that we have in our projects folder. And as we can see, there is already a dialog text styles data table. If you do not have a data table like this, you can always just copy the one from the data folder to your project. So if we can actually do that right now. So let's delete this one and copy it. So we have the newest version of it, the newest setup of it. Then we save it. And now let's customize it. The one thing that we want to customize now is the font, because we want to use the font that is provided by the UI asset so that we are consistent with the vision that Kenny had for that UI pack. So let's select the font family, which in our case is Kenny Future Font. And then we can select the typeface. In this case, we have default or narrow. If we quickly check in the font that we created, we see that the default looks a little bit more bold. So we actually could use this for the bold style. Because right down here we have a version of it in bold. So actually, let's also rename this. Instead of it being called default, let's call it bold. So we know, or at least down the line, we know what the intent of it was. So let's save. And then let's select narrow. And then we can go ahead and just right click, copy. And again, shift left click, shift left click, shift left click. Now we change this to bold. And shift left click, and we change this to bold as well. Now let's save. And now what we can do is we can go back to our Sandbox choice button and select our dialog text styles widget, dialog text styles data asset. And we want the one that's not in the Visual Novel Machinery plugins folder, but the one that we have here. So we use the one that's saved in game data. Now let's save. And as you can see, because there is an override in here, it's sticking to the Roboto Lite. So let's reset this and reset this as well. Compile and save again. And as you can see, the data asset from the font from Kenny is now active and our choice button looks like this. And as we can see, all the buttons have already been adapted to a new style. In this UI layout, I don't think we need a choice arrow anymore because it's not gonna fit the new style, so let's just delete that one. Now we have completed the Sandbox choice widget and the choice button, and we have already established a new text style also for the dialog box widget down the line. Now let's move on to the next widget. The next one that we're gonna do is, let's see, we did this one, we did this one, we did the choice button, the choice widget, we did the scene background display widget. We don't need the image choice button and the image choice widget because we already have them. But also if we remember back to tutorial video number 4 for this tutorial series, we will need multiple image choice widgets anyways, because for each different image choice we want to display different images. That's why we can just generate a new one for each of the choice scenes that we need. So the next thing that we then would do is the control button. As you can see, the control button wants a text button. We do not have a text button created yet. So let's do that. So let's go to UI, Common, right click, Visual Novel Machinery, and Main Menu Widget. As you can see, the main menu consists of a lot more widgets than the in-game, but for now we only need the menu text button because we need a text button for the control button. So let's click the menu text button widget, and then let's name it w_sandbox menu text button, and let's open it. Let's compile and save, and then let's customize it. The menu text button widget is different than the button than the choice button, because the menu text button already is using the new style system. So therefore it has a style object that we can use to style the button completely. So the style of the background, so the black rectangle that we can see here, the style of the text, and also the color of the text, and the transform of the text. So we have on the one side the style for the image, so color, texture, and transform, and also for the text. Now let's add in a default button text so we can see something. So let's say button text. Now let's again do the styling. As we remember from before, we want to have a similar styling for the buttons that are in the main menu, for example. So let's go to UI, green, default. Button rectangle depth is idle. Depth gloss is this one. And without depth is this one. And for this, if it's selected, then we use the depth for the selected and the selected hovered, and the non-depth for the pressed. And if the button is disabled or locked, we will use the button rectangle depth line. Now, as you can already see, something seems to be off because the texture is wrong. The reason is because this texture is set to a horizontal and vertical alignment, top left align vertically and left align horizontally. So let's put this to fill. And then it's also still not good enough because the text is too far on the sides. So let's give it a little bit of padding. So we want on the left side, let's do 10, and on the right side, let's do 10 as well. There you go. Now it already looks much better. But as we already said before, there's also the option to customize the font. So let's customize the font as well. So let's click get Kenny font again. And for idle, we leave it to narrow. And then now let's do shift right click and shift left click and shift left click, left click, left click, left click, left click. Now, if we want to do hovered, we use bold. For selected hovered, we also use bold. And the other ones all stick to narrow. Alright, and now we have a new menu text button that's already styled for its new purpose. Good. Then let's move on to the control button again. So in-game, right click, Visual Novel Machinery, in-game widget, control button. We select the Sandbox menu text button, and it also wants the icon button. So we have to abort once again because we need an icon button. So we go back to UI, Common, right click, Visual Novel Machinery, main menu widget. We select the menu icon button widget. Let's name it w_sandbox menu icon button. Let's open this, save and compile. And same as before, we can now customize the style. But as this is a menu icon button, it does not have a text. So therefore, all the settings that we have down here in the style for text, we can basically ignore. The only thing that's interesting for us is the icon that we have here. But as everything already is perfectly fine and set up here, we can just press save and close. Go to the in-game and right click Visual Novel Machinery, in-game widget, control button. So we select the Sandbox menu text button and we select the Sandbox menu icon button. After we have done that, our control widget is ready to be named. So let's call it w_sandbox control button. Now, what is actually a control button? A control button is basically a button that also displays what key binding it is, so or which button, which gamepad button, or which keyboard button has to be pressed to execute the following action. So if we go to w_sandbox control button, we can see up here that the input action name here is called save game, and the binding text is called save. There's also some other actions. So for example, if we press hide input key action, it would hide the icon. If we always want to use the touch icon instead, we can use this one, and it will always automatically display the touch icon. So if we click here, it would always display this directly. In our case, we want to have the system decide if we want the touch icon or if we want to have the default save game text. The difference between the two is that so basically if we do not set it to always, the system will check if you are on Android or iOS, and if that is the case, it will display the touch icon. Or so if you're not on mobile, it will use this one, the text control. Alright, let's compile and save. Let's quickly compare once again with the control button over here. There is no implementation here, so we are good to go. So let's move on to the next one. The next widget that we're gonna create is Visual Novel Machinery in-game widget. And there's only one widget left now, which is the dialog box widget. So this one already requires some more, also requires some other widgets. So it also wants a control button, because if you remember in the default UI, we have those touch icon buttons or the save, load, and back to main menu buttons at the bottom. So that is what a control button is, and we want to use that one as well. You can obviously use the one that's included in the engine as well, in the plugin as well, but for customization sake, so that you can customize everything the way you want, let's use the Sandbox control button so you're not dependent on the UI that's shipped with the plugin. Now that we have it created, let's name it w_sandbox dialog box widget. Alright, let's open it, let's compile and save. And now we have to do some changes here. So for the character, we obviously want to use the correct texture style set. Actually, for the character, as a character cannot have any colors, because it's automatically colored, we can just change this here. So this one's gonna be Kenny, and we're gonna use bold. Perfect. Now we press the text. The text is gonna be using our new style asset. We save. We also see that it's more spaced out, so it needs more space. So we can shorten the example text a little bit. Let's shorten it to here. There we go. Let's save. Also, it appears the buttons are not set up correctly, because there seems to be some additional numbers here. Let's remove those, and as you can see, it will automatically fix the naming. So this one should be load game, and this should be back to main menu. Actually, let's verify this. So we go to input. It's called return to main menu. So let's rename it to return to main menu. And as you can see, S, L, and R, and the continue is going to be the next dialog. So let's go next dialog. As you can see, we now have save, load, pause, menu, and continue. And the icon next to it. Now you might have already wondered, where do we get the icons? So, because obviously those keyboard icons are not hard-coded, so you can change them. So if you would want to change them, you can import your own icons and navigate to Visual Novel Machinery UI settings and change them right here. So if A is pressed, we want to use the dark key A. If we press B, we want to have, if the binding uses B, B, and so on, till for everything. And also in also for the future, it also already supports gamepad icons. So all the Xbox icons are also already available, so you can use them. If you want to change them, here's the place. If you want to know where they are located, you can go to the plugins content folder, go to art, you can go to UI, input, and there you have the keyboard mouse buttons in dark and in the light edition, and also the Xbox Series X buttons. The input icons are created by Nikolai Berbeck, and they are licensed under CC0, so you can also use them as well. I will post the link to those icons in the description if you want to download other icons as well, for example for PlayStation or for Switch. But you can also use input icons from Kenny, because Kenny made some as well. So you have a wide variety of options if you want to choose different icons. Good. Now we have customized all of our in-game UI. Actually, we haven't, because we have not customized the dialog widget. So let's finish customizing that one as well. So we want to have a different background. So let's go to content. Actually, before we customize it, it also has animations, which we need to import again from the plugins folder. So let's go to the plugins folder, blueprints, UI, in-game, dialog box widget, animations, and we copy over it once again as well. So copy the render opacity, we go to fade, don't forget to press the root panel so we can track it. There we go. And then let's copy the game saved, which is on the game saved texture that we do not have here. Why? Now the question is, why do we not have the game saved text here? The reason is because that's an additional customization that I just did for this widget, but not everybody wants to have it displayed here. Someone might want to display icon instead of a text. But in our case, let's use the text as well. So let's take this one, we copy it, and we add it to the root panel. Let's move it here. Then let's set the font. Actually, let's set this up already, game save text. Then copy this one. Now why don't we see, why is it not visible? Because per default in the original widget it's set to 0, so it's not visible. Now let's save this and then let's check the implementation. If we go to dialog box widget, we see there is some implementation here, and what we can do is we can just take all of this and just copy it over so we have a similar functionality. Let's remove what's left over here and let's move this a little bit further upwards. Let's move this also a little bit upwards. So what we do is on construct we attach ourselves to the onGame saved event from the game save subsystem. If the game is saved and it was successful, we set the text on our game save text button and set its render opacity to 1, and then we execute the game saved animation. Actually, we can also just delete this because it's happening in the animation anyways. Then we play the animation, and on destruct we unbind. Then if we start typewriting, we hide the continue sign. If we stop typewriting, we show the continue sign. And if we press save, then we show the save game widget, which is a function that's on the in-game controller. For load we call the load, and for pause we show the pause widget. Now let's press save. Then there is a problem here. It's requesting the continue sign. It's now no longer called continue sign. It's actually called continue control. So let's add this in here, save, and we're again good to go. Now, because we are in a customization mood, let's change everything up a little bit. So the game save text is now no longer over here, but we actually move it downwards on top of the text. Why would we do that? Because the idea is that let's fix the alignment. The X alignment should actually be centered. The idea is that we hide the dialog text that's shown and show the game saved, and then we fade back to the dialog text. So we move. So let's see, this one is up. So let's position the text box. So this one is up -185. So let's use this as well. So Y position is -185. Actually, let's do -225. -240. Let's do -250. Let's do -300. No, that's too much. -275. Perfect. Now, the animation that we want to have is we set the render opacity to 1, and the dialog box should be set to render opacity 0. Then let's track the render opacity. This one is set to 0. And this whole animation takes 1 second. So let's do a delay here. And starting from, let's say, 40, we stay at 0 again as well. And at 1 second, we are at 1 again. So now if we play this, you can see it says game saved, and then we have the dialog box back again. Now, one important thing that I just noticed is that the font used is also again the Roboto font. So let's change this. So we set it to Kenny. Let's do bold. Let's also make the text a little bit larger. And we press save. And as you can see now, if we press play, perfect. We have now customized the save mechanism and the visual save mechanism. Now, everything is set, done, and ready, so let's start the game. Press start game, and as we can see, it is still the old UI. Actually, we do not know if it's the old UI, but I can tell you already now, it is still the old UI. Why is that? Because we have to override the in-game controller. So we need to have our own in-game controller and our own in-game HUD, because the in-game HUD and the in-game controller, player controller, both are using components that have a reference to which UI, which widget should be used. So to make everything easier for us, let's just copy the BP in-game HUD from the plugins folder to our games folder. So UI, so content blueprints UI, let's copy this in. And as you can already see, there is some extra are the components. And let's use our widgets now. So let's go to the character controller. Then we go to character display widget class, and we select our sandbox widget class. Then we go to the CG display and select our sandbox widgets as well. The audio controller, we don't need to change anything. Rollback also not. And the dialog controller, we use the sandbox widget and the sandbox choice widget. Now we press save. And now one thing we need to do is also copy over the in-game controller. And if we are copying already the in-game controller, let's also take the in-game game mode, because we then change the game mode of the in-game level to our new in-game game mode and use that one so that everything's pointing directly to our custom assets, so we do not use the asset shipped with the plugin anymore. So let's go to Blueprint, Core, and we paste. Let's also then rename it to Sandbox. And rename this also to Sandbox. And we also rename the in-game HUD to Sandbox. Now we go back to the Blueprints core. We open the in-game Sandbox and we select the Sandbox in-game controller and the Sandbox in-game HUD. We save, we close, we go to the Sandbox in-game controller. We check if we need to change anything. Should not be the case. One thing about the save system will be explained in a different video, so we just take this implementation for granted, but we will look into it in more detail in another video. Alright, then we close this. And now that we have everything set up, we have to go to our maps, in-game level, change the game mode in the world settings, so PP Sandbox in-game game mode. And we see the HUD class and the player controller class is pointing to the Sandbox classes. So if the world settings tab is not available for you, you can go to window and click on world settings, and then it should be displayed, and then you can set the game mode. Make sure you're changing it in the in-game level, not the main menu. After you have finished it in the in-game level, click save and go back to main menu. Now we can press play, press start game, and as you can see, it is now our new UI. And as you see, if we hover, it's now getting bolder. It's not as narrow as before. Now we press onwards, and then we have to rename Bob. Let's rename him to Max. As you can see, the wrong font is used for the text input. We obviously have to fix this as well. So let's go to our UI in-game folder and navigate to our dialog text box. And let's modify this. So we now want to use the correct font. In this case, it should be Kenny, and let's use narrow. So we press save, and then we start the game again. And there we go. Now it's the new font. So now his new name is Test. And how old is he? 23. What's the name of the town he's living in? Town. So now let's go home and we move on to the next UI. And as you can see, we have the image choice widget again. We select the location and we end the game because we didn't implement it further. So now to finish this tutorial off, let's also quickly change the background of the UI element. So let's check if we have some nice textures. What's an extra? Oh, let's use this one. So let's use button square line. That sounds about right. Now let's. Oh, actually, our text is white. Not the best idea. Let's take a different color. Let's take gray. And let's use button rectangle border. Now obviously you can see it's now heavily scaled because it's drawn as an image. Let's instead use the border and define a margin. So let's say 0.5. Seems like the Unreal Engine is a little bit bugged here, but that doesn't matter. Actually not the border, but let's use the box. So it's actually filled. There we go. Now let's also change the size of this to not be the complete length, but instead make it the same size as the dialog box. So the dialog box is anchored to the bottom. So let's anchor this one to the bottom as well. Then let's copy this to the alignment over. Then let's copy the position. And then let's copy the size as well. Let's remove the background blur because we don't need it anymore. Actually, let's make it a little bit bigger on the X. So let's make it 1350. Actually, that was the wrong element. The background to 1350. There you go. Already looks a lot nicer. Then let's save. Then let's go into the in-game. Let's start the game again. Start game. And we have our amazingly customized UI. Alright, then let's close this. And let's go to graph. And then let's fix the cast down here. Because right here we're casting to BP in-game controller, which is actually the wrong cast because we now need the BP Sandbox in-game controller. So let's delete those nodes. And then let's cast to BP Sandbox in-game controller. Let's connect this and this. Then we can also then let's keep those for reference. Then let's in stakeholder show save game from this function. Let's align it nicely. Let's copy this here and here. Then cast again. Then let's do show load game widget. And then let's do the last one. Connect this and then show pause widget. And now let's compile and save. And then let's start the game. And now if we go start game and we click on load, we end up in the load game widget. And if we press save, we end up in the save area. And if we click pause menu, we will land in the pause menu, and it is the save game menu because the last menu that was open before we clicked it away was save game. And now if we press S, we also land here. We can also just press L here if we are already in here to switch, or we can just go back and press L again, and as we see, everything is working as expected. And the last thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go to main menu, we're gonna go to dialogues, and we will wait for the next video. In the next video, we'll be looking into the game save system. So we will look into how to set up the saving, the loading, and how to make custom save games, how to make custom persistent save games, everything about that. We will also be looking into audio, so how do you add background music, how do you add sound effects, how do you add voiceovers, all of that will be in the next video. So that's all from my side. Have a great evening and goodbye.